Welcome, welcome, welcome. So the open evening tonight is really to give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have from what you may have read already, your practice, and go a little bit more into the curriculum, the dates, and everything else that's sort of available online, but just to really expand on what you may already know. What really inspired me to create the curriculum as it now stands is to create a really well-rounded insight into the world of meditation and mindfulness, as well as two separate practices. So we created the 110-hour training, 60 hours face-to-face and 50 is away on doing your prac work and prac teaching and assignments, etc. But we really wanted this to be a hands-on training, because the best way that you learn to teach is to teach. The best way you learn to hold the space is to learn to hold the space. And so what we really felt was really important fundamentally is bring in the history of meditation. Sometimes people come into the space of meditation and feel as if, because of their current faith, that they're worried that meditation is religious. Well, if you go back in history, the first imagery of anyone sitting in meditation goes right back to Egypt and then extends through Central America, through the Mayan culture. So this has been happening for years. It's been used in the Christian faith, the Jewish faith, the Muslim faith. So this is really open to everybody and anybody. And why is that so important? Because we can see now more than ever the need for meditation is huge. It was needed so much before COVID, it's been needed so much more so afterwards. People are wanting to have a sense of agency around the way that they live their lives. They don't want to go to somebody else. They want to try and find some resources that help individuals be able to take responsibility for their own health. That means that they're wanting to learn about, how do I establish a practice? Well, a lot of people say, well, I can't meditate, I can't stop thinking. Well, that's not what meditation is. We're always going to keep thinking while we're alive. It's learning what you do with them. And can we just come into a room, sit down and start to meditate? No, you actually need a number of practices to support you in order to get there. And then what are those practices and why are those practices there? Well, that comes down to how the nervous system and the whole biochemistry of the body and the brain and the limbic system is operating as a result of the meditation practices and the pranayama practices in and of themselves. It means that once you understand the physiology behind what's going on in the brain and the body, it also means that you can tailor meditation techniques to individuals who might be presenting because of anxiety, depression. The World Health Organization said in 2008 that by 2020, we would be experiencing, or individuals would be diagnosed with anxiety and depression, and 1 in 3 people would be diagnosed with that. And we reached it way before. They then said by 2030 that that anxiety and depression would be the biggest financial burden on the medical system 10 years later than that. And we've already reached that. So individuals are wanting to learn, how can I understand more about myself? How can I learn to sit with myself? How can I learn to be in silence? And so, of course, now with all of technology and social media and artificial intelligence, we're also recognizing that an ability to be able to focus is almost impossible. They did a study to show that in the corporate sector, an individual can concentrate for up to a maximum of 7 seconds before they're distracted by something else. So this has to be retrained. And when this is retrained, your whole biochemistry becomes retrained. And so what's key about that is, how do you understand the whole psychophysiology, how the mind affects the body, and also how is the body informing the mind whilst sitting in a meditation practice. This is also about recognizing then, well, what are the therapeutic modalities around meditation? Well, this is all based in scientific research, because if you're asked to go off and deliver meditation in a corporate sector or in the emergency services, you're going to need to present research as to why this is important. Just because you feel that's great for you, it's not enough for another group to take that on. You also want to be able to look at reputable research. You don't want to read something or watch a YouTube video on somebody who's done a meta-analysis on a number of research papers, because how do you trust that person's opinion? We want for you to be able to obtain resources around, if you have a student who's saying, I'm moving through a treatment program for X condition and I would like to learn to manage my stress, because while stress is a picture, which 85% of diseases are, stress is also a part of that factor. And so if you can learn to manage that, then people are more likely to take that practice on. And so the physiology around this is really about understanding what actually happens within the brain and the body when we practice meditation. And then, of course, we go into a number of different practices that we work with. So we look at different pranayama, breathing practices. One of the key things that we do when we want to change from a stress response to a calm response is just 3 diaphragmatic breaths. We know that when we control the lungs and the anatomy of respiration and the physiology of respiration and breathing, we then have the capacity to change our nervous system. When we change our nervous system, we also change how our gut performs. And the gut is like a massive second brain. And the communication pathway between this brain and this brain is the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve also then controls the communication pathways between the gut and the brain. So understanding that means that you can then start to pick the pranayama techniques that you really want to do at that time. If you're doing a 6 a.m. practice, 6 p.m., 7:30 p.m., midday, 4 in the afternoon, what practices would you do first thing in the morning and what practices would you not do in the evening? So really having a real clarity around breathing is huge. And if you look at all of the work of Wim Hof over the last 5 years and breath work really coming to the fore, these are all old yogic techniques and even older than that. So we now have the science to back up what's happening. And what's really important about that is that your students want to know why. Why, when I do that practice, do I feel calm? Because I'd like to do that again. And then what often happens when you get that shift is you then feel the call to want to share that with other people. If only they knew that they had this. And so as we move through the pranayama practices, we then start moving through the different mindfulness and meditation practices that are out there. So we cover working with mantra, we cover walking meditation, we cover internal and external observations. We cover around 25 or 26 different techniques so that the practices that you're offering can meet anyone and everyone, and then they choose what works for them. This also means that there are a number of guided visualization practices that can be used as a practice of meditation. And so a number of these you might have already seen on the Moksha online platform. If any of you are an Insight Timer, you might have heard some of my recordings on Insight Timer. And they are guided visualizations as well as meditation techniques, as well as pranayama practices. So we want for your toolbox to be as full as possible so that you can find the right combination of all of those within a practice. It also means about learning, how do you prepare the body for meditation? What if somebody can't sit down on the floor? What if somebody can't sit cross-legged? What are the props that you use? What are the traditions of the practice? How do you assist somebody to sit in a chair against a wall, freely from a wall? What are the props? Why do we have the props the way that we do? Why is the pelvis higher than the knees? And there's a whole energetic reason for that. When the pelvis is higher than the knees, we work with 5 of the 49 vayu. For those of you who've done yoga teacher training, you'll know of the 49 vayu, the winds of energy that help prana move around the body. And the 5 key vayu that we work with are prana in the lungs, upana that rises, udana that rises, apana that draws down the base of the legs, samana for digestion, and vyana for the whole musculoskeletal system. When you sit with the pelvis higher than the knees, you actually tap into the inhale and exhale through apana and prana vayu. And so there's a reason why we choose the seated positions that we do. But you can't always assume that everybody can do this. You'd also think that children would be crackers sitting for meditation. I can tell you in our children's yoga class, that's the bit they love at the end. You think, oh my goodness, I don't know how I'm going to have to get them all to sit, but they love it. And so within those techniques, we also recognize that there are some specialist fields here. One, there's working with meditation in trauma management, because sometimes sitting in silence is a big trigger. Not everybody knows how to deal with that. You learn to hold space for it. You learn to refer on. That process is really important. You're here as a facilitator, not as any other medical practitioner. But it's really great for you to be trauma informed so that you can see when someone is responding that way, it's actually triggering something else. Although pretty much all the research is showing that meditation and mindfulness has really positive benefits, a study in 2016 showed that 23% of a particular group of practitioners of meditation actually found it exacerbated anxiety and depression, and it stimulated a trauma response. So just because we know that it's great, not everybody feels that. So learning how to work with individuals to be trauma informed is really important. And then, of course, learning what is the referral process and who do you refer those individuals on to? Because we have a duty of care fundamentally to care for our students while they're in that space. We also recognize that meditation is often taken up as a tool when people are working with pain management, chronic and acute. And they'll often say that acute pain, if any of you have had injuries, lasts 21 days, and chronic past 6 months, subacute up to 3 months. I've worked with individuals who have been in an acute and chronic picture for a really long time. So there are a number of mindfulness and meditation techniques that people are working with when working with pain management, either because they're undergoing treatment or because they have an injury and they're finding it really debilitating. And of course, we also look at meditation for children because they love it. And we want for you, again, to be able to be in a space where you can teach everybody. We also teach you to teach yoga nidra. Yoga nidra means yogic sleep. It's usually a 20-minute, but can be 60-minute practice that creates in the body, just from that period of time, the feeling as if you've had a nana nap for 2 to 4 hours. So they've scientifically shown that the brain starts to change and your body feels as if you have had a nap. Your cellular regeneration has been significant from yoga nidra. So we have incorporated the practice of yoga nidra into this training. We also recognize the science of sound. Sound is an incredible tool for meditation and mindfulness. Again, mantra isn't just practiced out loud, it's also practiced internally. And sometimes those internal repetitions of mantra can actually be even more powerful than chanting them out loud. We also work with Tibetan bowls, the crystal bowls, and we also work with the solfeggio frequencies, the Schumann resonance. We also recognize that we have brain waves that's moving through the skull that's also influencing our biochemistry. So we also look at sound and how that resonates within the body. We look at how that supports tissue regeneration, muscle repair. And so it's a great way that you can add that onto your tools and techniques. So we cover a real vast array rather than just one technique over that whole period of time. We also then have a unit based on how do you then get your work out there. So there's a business module that's incorporated. How do you market yourself? How do you get onto social media? Not everybody wants to have a web page anymore. Social media is usually where they communicate. How do you really find your voice? How do you really find what you want to be sharing? Because ultimately there's already one of me. We don't need any more. We want you to be fully you. So part of that training is to really help you find your voice. Find what resonates with you. What do you feel your gift is? What is your dharma? How do you want to share that with the world? And in what form is that going to take and how that's going to look? And some of you already have an idea around where these teachings are going to be shared, but life has a very interesting, quirky sense of humor, and you might find yourself in very diverse fields. Particularly if this is something you want to sort of dive into as full-time, or even if you don't, you've got the tools there. First and foremost, this is also about supporting you to have a daily sadhana, because that informs you more than I ever could. Knowing what that consistency looks and feels like, and what your life is looking like from having a consistent practice is key. Otherwise, how do we then share that with other people? And so part of your first assignment is to actually go and observe 5 meditation classes and just see what's being offered and what you really love about that. And what would you pick up about that? And how would you do that differently? The second assignment is where you actually start to put some class plans together. So we give you a real format and a structure around the beginning, the middle, and the end. How do you begin? And then the third assignment is where you actually create a meditation and mindfulness course, 5-week course. Because if you want to get students to come to see you, a lot of people are, oh, I'm not sure what meditation is. I don't know that I want to just join a group that's already established. We'll create a course. And then your final assignment is to deliver those 5 classes that you created in assignment 2. All of the other content that's required of you is all done within the face-to-face space on the Saturday and the Sunday, where we meet between 10 and 6 on both of those days. And it just gives you an opportunity, as we move through the techniques and I teach those techniques to you, you also then start to teach each other. Because again, that's the best way to learn. And we would rather you get your nerves out the way with each other than feel as if the first time you ever teach a group is when you have then qualified. It's like asking a pilot to fly their first plane 5 years after training. I'd like to know if I'm going to Kuala Lumpur that somebody has at least knows how to take the handbrake off and has had a little bit of a fly. And so sadhana is really key. It supports you over the 6-month window to really dive deep into yourself and what really is calling you and what's really wanting to shape who you want to be as a space holder, and learning to hold that space for students within a group setting. And so pretty much everything that we think that we could be covered so that you feel ready. And so as soon as you finish your training, you can go out there straight away and get started. Just because one way might work for one person doesn't necessarily mean that that way is going to work for everybody. And if you only teach one way, it's really quite narrowing, because you might go and deliver meditation in the corporate space. You might be delivering it in a childcare space. You might be as an OT or as a coach or wherever it might be. We want for you to have a really vast toolbox so that you can pull out of that toolbox the practices and the techniques that you can do. So we recognize that in 2017 that really there needs to be a more expansive course, and something that really provides teachers in training with the opportunity to feel confident to teach straight after you have finished. You can go up and open a meditation space, add it to what you're already doing and what you're already delivering. It's a really transformative experience. It has to be. It has to be. It can't be theoretical. It has to be something that guides you into much deeper inquiry into who you are, how you're living your life, what are your belief patterns. And so that deep inquiry really comes from you, and that expansive nature of existing as the true essence that you are. And then you share that gift with other people, whether that's part-time, full-time. And even if that's not something that you're really called to, even if you feel unsure that this is something that you feel that you want to be teaching, it doesn't matter, because the dive into all of the practices gives you so much for your own practice, that in a way we want you to embark on the beginning of this journey as if you're here for you. And you were saying that, like, I'm here for selfish reasons. Well, actually, it's not. It's self-filling, because once you take that deep dive, you'll know where your path is going to take you, and that will start to become even wider.